Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Daniel, and we are now in chapter 6. We left off at verse 18. Just to recap a little bit, was that the king had signed off a decree, and the Medo Persian decree is such that when the king signs off, it cannot be revoked. It was for a 30-day period that if anyone were to make petition of any gods or any other persons must be made through the king. And this was a conspiracy to entrap Daniel. And while Daniel was trying to avoid all of these people, he didn't pray in the open, but he went home and hid himself to pray, but yet he was found out. Now, in so doing, it really didn't matter what he said, whether he had make petition or not. The fact that he prayed indicated that he must have. And so he was guilty of violating the decree. And so the king was trying very hard to find a way out to save Daniel, but he couldn't. So eventually, Daniel was thrown into the lion's pit. Now we call it the lion's pit. In the English, it is called a den, but it's actually a hole whereby the lions would be inside, and the lions are the ones that's going to roam down there. And Daniel was thrown into the lion's pit. In that pit itself, there's also a rock that was covering it to make sure that he doesn't come out. Now, this is very important because this whole conspiracy was really to deal with Daniel because he was an obstacle to everybody else. The king loved him so much because he was so outstanding and such an excellent person. And so the idea was once you get rid of Daniel, then everything will be fine. Now, in so doing, you find that the king was horrified and could not sleep. And so in verse 18, the king went back to his palace. He spent the night fasting, meaning he didn't eat or drink, and no entertainment. And this idea of entertainment is really a food tray. And since he's not eating, so the food was not brought before him. And this word is quite interesting. His sleep literally, now this is an Eastern way of expressing it, ran away and escaped him. And what that means is he couldn't sleep. We continue in verse 19. Verse 19 then tells us this. It says, then. Now, all these thens are very interesting because in the Aramaic, they have to word this in, telling us that it was after verse 18, then verse 19 happened. In the Hebrew, it's more of an indicator. And so here, and then the king got up at dawn at the break of day. Now, this idea at dawn literally means that he was at the dark side. I guess you can say uh, in the dark before the dawn. Now, what this means is when the night is still dark and when the sun is about to come out, now that is that period of time that we're talking about. The dawn at the break of day, before the sun came out, it was still dark. Because he couldn't sleep the entire night, he went very hurriedly to the lion's pit. The English word den seems to tell us that it was in a cave somewhere, but it's not. This one is really the lion's pit. Very different from how we look at a place where they keep lions. So this is very similar to, for example, like in a zoo, where in a zoo, instead of behind cages, they would put lions in a deeper hole so that they can't climb out. Verse 20. And as he went in a hurry, very rapidly, he ran to the lion's hole. And when he come near to the pit, now this would be the pit. Uh, Understand that this is not a den. And he came to Daniel. He cried out with a troubled voice. Now, this word troubled voice is a sad voice. A sad cry. I think that would be a good word. A sad, a painful cry. I'm trying to spend some time to explain the words because the Aramaic words that is being used is very expressive. It tells a story in the actions and depicts the emotions that's around the scene. Otherwise, you'll be reading the English text very dry, without much nuances. It's just like a storybook. But the Semitic language in Aramaic is very imagery driven. Now, as he came and he cried out in a sad, painful, you can say, troubled voice, he cried out, saying to Daniel. Now, look at what he says to Daniel. He says, Daniel, servant of the living God. This is, I guess you can say that it's somewhat of a shock because this word here, servant, as opposed to a messenger, servant means one who listens, one who listens to the master, to a master. And so the king treats the living God as the master of Daniel. When we talk about this living God, this would be the living God of Daniel, meaning this is the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And this description also has a different expression. It is God, God who is living, right? God, the one living. I think that's a better way. The one who is living, the one who is alive. And so this word here is Chai, the living God, the God who is alive, the God who is living. And that is a very peculiar expression. The king Darius acknowledges that Daniel is very loyal to his God, and in so doing, he was entrapped. And there was no way King Darius could save Daniel. And now that he is in the lion's pit, he is talking about whether Daniel's God, the living God, has done anything. Now, the idea of living means he is a God that Daniel trusts, that Daniel supports, that Daniel depend on, that is able to perform works, great works, or what we call miracles, in the idea of not humanly possible works. And that is the idea that the king has. Could Daniel's God perform the miracle of saving Daniel? And so when we read, it says, has your God, whom you continually serve. Continually serve means you continually minister. This is the word, to minister. To serve, not as just a servant, but as one who listens to what God says to do and he does it. Was he able to rescue you from the lions? And that is what the king was very interested to know. And then suddenly Daniel spoke to the king. And Daniel said, O king, live for olam, not forever, for olam or olamin. Olam means for a long time, a long epoch. Between verse 20 and 21, we will be able to see the shock and surprise of King Darius. He was trying to figure out if Daniel survived, and Daniel spoke. So you can imagine that King Darius would have been extremely shocked, pleasantly shocked, I would say. Verse 22, Daniel continues to say this. It says, my God, my Ilahi, right? Ilahi is my God. And so this word here is Ilahi. Very similar to the Arabic word. My God sent his angel. And this word angel is Mal'ak. This is one who is sent by God. Mal'ak. In other words, there is also the word God that is used for angel, but in this case, very specifically, one who is sent by God, a mal'ak, a messenger. And it says, he came and locked up the lion's mouth. Shut means glue tight. And they have not harmed me. And here I want to highlight that this word harm is very important because it keeps repeating itself. This word is harm. This word also means to destroy. They are all very important words because it's continually used. It means to hurt. And then it says, since I was found innocent. The idea of innocent here really means that he was pure. He was pure and he was sincere. And the reading would be, he is sincere. And so he had merits. And because of his merits before God, and also toward you, O king, I have committed no crime. Now, these words are important. When it says, I have committed no crime, this word crime is the same as harm. That I have not done anything to harm you or to destroy you. And that would be the play of words. And obviously in English, you won't be able to see that. We go to verse 23. And then the king was very glad. Now, this word very glad literally means to be very good, was very good. Now remember, good in Hebrew as well as Aramaic is something which is pleasing. And so you can say that the king was very pleased. He gave orders for Daniel to be lifted up of the pit. And so Daniel was lifted up of the pit, and no injury was found. Now, this word, no injury, is the same word, no harm. He was not destroyed in whatever way because he had trusted in his God. This idea of trust is very similar to the Hebrew. This is amen. Like how we use words to end the prayer as amen, literally means to support, to trust, to have confidence in what God has said or done before. This idea of trust is not about the future, but because of the past knowledge of God, that Daniel could trust in God. It is not in anticipation of the future. Oftentimes, when we read this word trust, we tend to look into the future. But in the Hebrew and the Aramaic context, the support and the trust and the confidence is what God had done, already done. And so you know that God has been with Daniel all this while, being able to tell him what the dream of Nebuchadnezzar was, being able to interpret dreams of Nebuchadnezzar, also to counsel Nebuchadnezzar, also to speak to Belteshazzar, to interpret the writing on the wall. So all of these things are things that Daniel had already encountered in the past. And that is why he trusted God, because he had done nothing wrong to deserve this. We then go to verse 24. Now, in verse 24, you find that the king, now there is the word, and then the king gave orders. You see the word then. And they brought those men who had, now we have this strange word, maliciously accused Daniel. Now, this word maliciously accused Daniel was seen earlier in this chapter. This word is eat, chew. Because it is eat, chew, you find that they were the ones who informed of Daniel. They were also the ones who had slandered. So you can say slander is a good word here. Slander. They were the ones who accused falsely. And so this word maliciously accused comes from the word eat, chew. And so in the Aramaic is a very imagery language, that these were the leaders who wanted to eat up Daniel and chew Daniel in a way where they presented to the king all the falsehoods. In turn, we see now that they threw them, their children, their wives, into the lion's pit. And before they reached the bottom of the pit, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. This will give us a picture of a contrast. The contrast with Daniel. Remember, when Daniel was there, the lions would not be able to do any harm because God had sent his messenger, an angel. But here in verse 24, before they arrive or they drop to the bottom, the lions were all over attacking these people. Now, understand, you may think that it's very horrifying. It is them, their children, and their wives. In the ancient days, you would find that when a vengeance and a judgment is done, retrospective of what they had earlier done falsely, you would see the same case in the Middle Persian Empire down the road with Esther, with the family of Haman. And here, in the same way, you can say that it is very Eastern, and even in China, the Eastern emperors will eradicate, to cut off the roots of the grass, so to speak, and would not allow any future vengeance to take place. Now, this is, it appears very terrible, but it is the practice, and the Middle Persian Empire is not also a friendly empire, but they were friendly to the people of God. Verse 25 is where we're going to spend a little bit of time. For this part, in the last portion of chapter 6, we need to dwell on some of the details, because these are the places where we can actually gather a lot more information, a lot more understanding of how King Darius now views the God of Daniel. So it says, and then Darius the king. Remember, Darius the king is a Mede from Madai. He wrote to all the peoples, nations, and tongues. Languages here is literally tongues. In the old days, there is no word called language because the language comes out from the tongue of a person. And so different languages is using the expression of the tongue. This is very similar to the way that Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 4, when he wrote the letter to people, nations of all languages across the land, the kingdom. And then he says, may your peace be great. Now, this is very interesting because the word peace here actually is shalom. This is the equivalent of shalom. I think we can say that. It is shalom. It is shalom, which is equivalent to shalom. Now, understand that this word shalom, although translated as peace, it is also giving the idea of prosperity. It gives us the idea of well being besides peace. Now, let me explain a little bit. In the Hebrew context, you find that you have to deal with all problems first. Once problems are resolved, and in this case, the problems are the leaders who tried to eat and chew Daniel, who told lies to the king, and that he had, in verse 24, punished these very individuals as well as their sons and their wives. And so when problems are solved, there is peace. And that you get shalom or shalom. That is what it means. And so now there are nobody else trying to fight with Daniel. All of Daniel's oppositions are now, what we can say, annihilated. And Daniel is left standing all alone by himself because he was the most excellent and the king really liked him. With that said, and this would be the salutation, and the salutation talks about peace, shalom or shalom. That would be how it is read. With that said, it is to infer that there's no more troublemakers in the kingdom. And with that said as well, look at what the king is writing. I issue a decree that in all the domain of my kingdom, people are to tremble. This is very important. People are to tremble and fear. Two words here. Tremble means to shake. Fear means to be, well, I guess you can say afraid, or you can say it is to have the dread, be afraid. Why? Because the God of Daniel is very different. And he attests to this. He is living God. Living God means he's a God that can act in time. He's a God that you can see that is alive. Now, what is alive? In the normal way of talking about a person is alive, is that the person is able to breathe. The person is able to move by himself, and that the person can go and do things, can eat, can interact. So you can see that a person is alive. When they say that God is a living God, The idea of living God uh, is actually Elaha Chaya. It means that God can be seen to do things. So let me just put it here. Can be seen in action. So what did the king see? The king saw that Daniel was protected from the lions. And when there was no protection from the lions, everybody died, crushed before they landed on the bottom of the pit. It is how ferocious the lions were. And so the king has seen, and that's why the king can declare the God of Daniel is a living God because he can see God in action. When you can only talk about God, then and you can't see, then God is not alive. So that is where we remember on Mount Carmel, where Elijah challenged the 450 prophets of Baal and kept telling them, no, shout louder, maybe your God is asleep. And when the time came for Elijah, he he looked up to the heavens, and God responded by sending the fire to lick up everything, including the wet sacrifice. So it can be seen. And when people see that, they know that God is alive. And he endures forever. It's not forever here. This word here is olam. Olam means a long time. And it goes hand in hand with the next phrase, his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. Same word, will not be harmed. Nobody can hurt it. And his dominion will be forever. And this word does not exist. It doesn't read forever. This word means until end. Until end of epoch. How long is the epoch? Olam. Long time. And so when the epoch ends, then that is this kingdom that he sees. And so that's the expression. It is to express because the Eastern people don't deal with the terminal. The Eastern people is looking forward. So as long as there is time uh, and there is no cessation, you find that the kingdom of God will continue and will continue for a long time. How long? Don't know. Until the end. When is the end? Also don't know. Now that's the picture that is being described to us. Next, we have the expression here about the God of Daniel. He says that the God of Daniel, he rescues, saves. Now, there are two words here, both refer to the same thing. He rescues, set free. He saves. Saves means to extricate. Extricate. He delivers. And so Daniel was set free, he was delivered. And then the king adds on a few words. The words are this, that God performs signs and miracles in heaven and on earth. And so this is an expression. The expression is when the God of Daniel is a living God, then he can ascribe all the things that is up in the sky and down here on earth, all that is made by God. So you can say that it is acknowledging God is the creator God, a God who can do wonders. The idea of wonder is a miracle, something that is unexplainable. Signs are things that is supernatural that can be seen. Miracles are things that cannot be explained in heaven and on earth. And then it says here, It is this same God who has rescued, and this word rescued is to deliver, uh, basically, this word here, rescues Daniel from the power of the lions. Now, these are interpreted words. The word in Aramaic is not power, but hand. It is not wrong, but understand this. Literally speaking, God of Daniel had set Daniel free from the hand, or if you like, the paws of the lions. That is the picture. And all of these is because he has seen what God has done in action by enabling Daniel to be free. We come to our last verse, and that will be in verse 28. It says, this Daniel, this, not any other Daniel, this Daniel who escaped the lion's pit. This is one and only Daniel. And it says this, he enjoyed success, and this is a good word. Uh, this idea of success means whatever he does, it moves forward. And so you can call this success, prosper. These are the words. But in a more concrete way, the things that Daniel wanted to do could advance. Nothing could stop what Daniel wanted to do. And in so doing, we are also told that his success, he had served in the reign of Darius the Mede and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. As a matter of ending, Darius is the Mede, and he served 1 year, as we had talked about in chapter 6, verse 1. Next came Cyrus. When Cyrus the Persian, now understand that this is a kingdom of Medo Persia. The first king was from Mede, the second is a Persian. It is when Cyrus came where it is the 70th year. And Cyrus was the one who gave an edict and declared that the Jews can go back to rebuild the temple and the city. And so Daniel was in play for this period of time to be there with Cyrus as well. Now, we don't read of Daniel and Cyrus. We only read of Daniel and Darius. We read of Darius in chapter 8, in chapter 11, and, and it is the understanding that it is in that last year that many things happen to Daniel. Daniel has already aged, but the time has not yet come for the return to Jerusalem. And so it has to wait until Cyrus the Persian comes onto the scene. Now, with this, we can see Cyrus being in the times of Ezra. So you read of Cyrus in Ezra chapter 1. And by that time, you see that Cyrus, in the reign of Cyrus, when he started in Babylon, it would have the presence of Nehemiah. It has a presence of Ezra. It has a presence of Daniel. It has a presence of all the leaders who eventually went back to Judah, to Jerusalem, to rebuild the city and then the temple. So you have Zerubbabel and the whole group. Now, the reason why I mention this is because of the idea of Cyrus. Right after that, you find that the oral traditions of the Jews speaks of a great assembly or the assembly of great men where it comprised of Daniel, Nehemiah, Ezra, Zerubbabel, and all the high priests and a number of prophets like Zechariah, Malachi, and Haggai. And so all of these eventually uh, gave us a new era of the post-exilic period. And we would leave it at that for now, so that you can see that Daniel lived through the years of Babylon and then the starting of the Medo-Persian Empire, and then from Darius the Mede into Cyrus the Persian. And thereby we don't read of Daniel anymore after this. And so we would leave it at that. What we don't know of Daniel, it's because we're not told. But whatever that may be, we will be now interested to look at what is going to happen in chapter 7. And with this, we come to the end of our session today.